All right, guys, I am back. I have been talking to you about memorization technique for all these 16 subjects on the bar exam. I've done a few of them already. Today, I'm going to talk to you about techniques um, on how to memorize for property. Property, as you all know, is a dreaded subject for most um, bar exam takers as well as law school students. I find a way to make property memorable. I find a way to make property um, a subject you can appreciate once you understand how to go about memorizing those difficult um, issues on property. So without further ado, let's get started. My method is I follow. If you haven't watched my video on the 12 principle of recalls, I suggest that you go and look for that video and watch it. Because this video will help you understand my method. Because I use 12 principle of recalls to integrate on those subject with those subject to facilitate um, easy recall, if you will. So, without further ado, we create a map, right? In every subject, we create a map. And what does map stand for? Memory action plan. Memory action plan. So, for property, what is our map for property? So, for property, our map, we start with um, present the video. My camera keep falling down. So with property, um, we start with present estate and future interest. Present estate and future interest. We'll start there, and then we weave in all the way down to concurrent estate. Again, this is just for um, the essay part of the by exam. Although you will find a lot of tips that will help you with the multiple choice as well. I strongly believe that you have to know the law, and if you know the law, it will help you not only on the essays on the uh, but also on the essay as well. It will help you both on the MBE and on the essay as well. So when I was in law school, some people who would come and talk to us would tell us, don't worry about the law. If you don't know the law, you can make it up. And I find this to be not true. You can't make something you don't know. Um, and that was a fatal advice, really, in reality, because if you have a fact pattern and you don't know the law, you will not even see the issues. And if you don't see the issues, how in the world you would be able to make the rule up? Because first you must recognize the issue and then issue rules, following the IRAC method, the issue rules and analysis. So you need to be able to recognize the issue first. And more often than not, students don't pass because they don't have enough issues. And you don't have enough issues on paper because you didn't see the issues. Why you didn't see the issues? You don't know the rule that triggered that issues, period. So, and that's why through my research, I came up with a way to memorize 16 subjects. Because if we know the rules, we know the law, then we can spot any issues and any fact patterns any given day. So without further ado, again, my preaching, let's move on to what's important. So property, we're creating a roadmap for property. We have 5 trees. If you want to keep it long, I talk about trees in the last video that I did on PR, professional responsibility, to keep up with that team. And it's easy to create trees because trees have branch and sub branches, and they have fruits and so on and so forth. So, and the law in a way is in the same way, because you look at a body of law that has several different layers. You can go with it. So it's using um, the using the comparisons. The law with the tree makes sense. So we start with five trees with property. So that's the first trees would be present and future, present estate and future interest. And our second tree would be land sell contract before closing. Land sell contract before closing. And evidently, our third tree would be land sell contract after closing. So again, everything we do, we do them in a way that one thing would lead to the next, right? So we start with present estate followed by future interest necessarily, and then the second tree which would be the tree of land sell contract before closing, right? Before closing, pre-closing, and then the second um, land sell contract before closing would follow by land sell contract post closing, after closing, right? And this would be our second tree. So the second tree has land sell contract before closing and land sell contract post closing, after closing. Um, the third tree would be land use. My cell phone will not stand still. So the third tree would be our land use issues. So that would be the third trees, land use issues. And the fourth tree would be landlord tenant issues, and the fifth tree would be co-ownership issues. What's under those trees? What are those branches that we have under each of those trees? First, let's debug this a little bit. The first tree being the present estate. We have five present estate, and four future interests. So what I would do is contrast number five and number four together. 5/4, right? Five present estate and four future interests. What are those five present estate? There are number one, fee simple absolute. Fee simple absolute. Number two, fee simple determinable. Fee simple determinable. Number two. Number three, fee simple subject to condition subsequent. Fee simple subject to condition subsequent would be number three. Number four would be fee simple subject to an executory interest. Fee simple subject to an executory interest. And number five would be our life estate. Number five, life estate. Note that I leave fee tail out. I leave fee tails out. I leave it on purpose. It's never tested, so I don't really talk about it, right? So, five present estate. We just name them, and we have four future interests. Four future interests. What are those future interests? Number one, possibility of reverter. Possibility of reverter would be number one. Number two, right of reentry. Number two, right of reentry. Number three would be our springing or shifting interest. Springing or shifting interest. And number four would be our vested remainder or contingent remainder. Vested or contingent remainder. Okay, so that what you would find under present estate in future interest, right? Those are the subtrees. that is on their present estate and future interests. Um, so let's do a story around present estate and future interests because that's how you will be able to remember things. Again, based on our principle of recall, we say that we will remember pictures more than we remember words. So we're creating a story around present and future interests so that a complex issues, a complex subject could become manageable, right? We are taking a very difficult subject and make it very easy to understand and very easy to follow and very easy to remember. Okay, so here's the story. Since we have five present um, estate and we have four future interests, we're going to unite them together. We're going to unite them together. We're going to unite the present estate and the future interests. Okay, at the outset, I want you to remember that we have five present estate and we only have four future interests. So to unite them means that we're going to marry them together. We're going to marry the present estate with the future interest together. Again, we're doing this for the sake of memorization, right? So to have an even number, this story actually works out great because we can drop fee simple absolute because fee simple absolute is the largest estate known to man. It does not follow by any other interest. So there is no need to marry fee simple absolute, right? This remember this was the first one under the five present estate we said we have. We have five present estate, fee simple absolute, fee simple determinable, fee simple subject to condition subsequent, fee simple subject to an executory interest, and life estate. So fee simple absolute is by itself, so we're going to leave it alone for the purpose of our story. And we're going to move on to the next um, issue, which is fee simple determinable. So we're going to marry fee simple determinable with a future interest. So fee simple determinable, we know, is always followed by the possibility of reverter. So we're going to marry fee simple determinable with possibility of reverter. Fee simple determinable unite with possibility of reverter. So this is our first wedding. Remember, we are going to have four weddings today because fee, fee simple absolute is not going to be married, is going to be women single, but the other fee simple, the other present interest, I'm sorry, the other present um, estate will be married to another future interest. So the first marriage is fee simple determinable married with the possibility of reverter. Um, and that's how you're going to remember it because you're going to remember that fee simple determinable is necessarily followed by the spouse being a possibility of reverter. Again, remember in our principle of recall, we're creating pictures, right? You see pictures. You see possibility of reverter as a woman, if you will, and fee simple determinable as the male. So here's your marriage. Here's the pictures. His. So what language do we use to marry those two people? We use the language. Um, when people marry, they have to take a vows. What language do they use to take their vows? They use um, driving while under the influence, driving D, while W, under U, the influence. Driving for doing. W for while. And under the influence, that's U for until. They use durational language. Durational language. Driving mean doing, and while doing, while, until, and at the end they use, as long as we both shall live, but they use so long as we both shall live. Okay, so long as. So those are the language of the rational, that fee simple determinable, used to married with the possibility of reverter. They use driving under the influence so long as. Okay, so doing, while, until, so long as. You see those language, then you know there is a fee simple determinable that is necessarily followed by a possibility of reverter. Okay? No if and but about it. And we use exaggeration as well as a principle of recall. If you want to exaggerate this even more so you can remember those, you can say something like the contradiction that a fee simple determinable, someone who is so determined, would marry somebody who is not so determined. It's a possibility. Possibility of reverter. Determinable, married out of character, we would say, because he married someone who's not so determined, only a possibility, right? So that's another way to remember that fee simple determinable followed by a possibility of reverter, using language doing, while, until, so long as to unite their union. Okay? So enough said about the first marriage. Then we move on to the second marriage. We have the second present state being fee simple subject to condition subsequent. Fee simple subject to condition subsequent. Married with the right of reentry. That's the future interest, right of reentry. Right of reentry is the future interest. Fee simple subject to condition subsequent is the present state. Always follow a right of reentry. Okay? Fee simple subject to condition subsequent, always followed by the right of reentry. So we married them then. If they follow each other in such a way that they are always together, that's how we're going to remember them. That fee simple subject to condition subsequent is always together with the right of reentry. So we married fee simple subject to condition subsequent with the right of reentry, right? What language do they use, right, to seal their vow? They use language, but if, right, on the condition that, provided that. Okay, so they use language of condition. So there's a conditional fee simple subject to condition. The word is in there. Condition subsequent. Decide to marry right of reentry with certain condition. Okay, without those conditions, fee simple subject to condition subsequent wouldn't marry. Okay, so whenever you see word of condition, then you know you are dealing with fee simple subject to condition subsequent. Subject to certain limitations we will talk about later. We will make that clear because there are another couple that use language of condition as well, but we will separate it when we get there. We will separate them and we will make it clear, abundantly clear, that you will understand and it will make sense to you. But for now, suffice that you remember that fee simple subject to condition, here's the word, condition subsequent, impose a condition, right, impose the conditions on the right of reentry. There's a conditions, and because there is a condition, then right of reentry follow by fee simple subject to condition subsequent is not an automatic right. It's not an automatic right. So fee simple subject to condition subsequent, being the husband, need to do something, need to go to court to exercise his right of reentry. And recall, and if I didn't mention that, fee simple determinable, whose wife is, the possibility of reverter is automatic. It is an automatic right. Possibility of reverter automatically follow fee simple determinable, while the right of reentry does not follow automatically to fee simple subject to condition subsequent. It must exercise its right of reentry by going to court. Okay. The third union, third marriage, is the fee simple subject to an executory interest will be married to two person. Okay. So this is our polygamous marriage. This fee simple subject to an executory interest decide to take two wives, two weddings at the same time. Maybe not. But that's how we're going to remember that fee simple subject to an executory interest has for wife a shifting interest and a springing interest. Shifting, springing. Okay? So fee simple subject to an executory interest necessarily followed by either a shifting interest or a springing interest. And what language do they use to cement their union? They use language very similar to the language used by fee simple determinable and the language used by fee simple subject to condition subsequent. And this can be confusing, but if you follow with me, it is not. So it is a hybrid, the language they use, it's a hybrid. What separates them is the word then to. So fee simple subject to an executory interest could use language so long as no church is built on the property, then to. So when you see the word then to, then you know, even though you have the word so long as, you are not dealing with a fee simple determinable subject to a possibility of reverter, but rather you are dealing with an executory interest followed by a springing or a shifting interest going to a third party. Okay? And thus, this is another distinction that is worth mentioning here, that fee simple determinable subject to fee simple determinable followed by the possibility of reverter, which is automatic, go to the grantor, goes back to the grantor, and fee simple subject to an executory interest followed by the right of reentry, who's married the right of reentry, also go back to the grantor. Here, a fee simple subject to an executory interest go to a third party. That is a major distinction. That's another way that you will be able to separate them, because the language they use is a hybrid. It's very similar to the language you will see in fee simple determinable and the language in fee simple subject to an executory interest, with the only distinction they use then to send that shifting interest or that springing interest to a third party. and we say that fee simple subject to an executory interest go to a third party, it does not go back to the grantor, as opposed to fee simple determinable and fee simple subject to an executory interest, the spouse go back to the grantor, not to a third party. So those are the difference you keep in mind with the stories and so on and so forth. Okay. Last wording is the life estate. Life estate. A life estate uh, followed by either a vested remainder or a contingent remainder. A vested remainder or a contingent remainder. Um, so, and a life estate also use the word to cement their union. It's very obvious. You will see it for the life of A, right? And the other language that a life estate use also is a hybrid, because once the life estate is over, the future interest goes to a third party as well. So life estate and executory interest, their future interest go to third party. So those two, executory interest and life estate, that's another distinction, another way to remember them. Their future interests go to a third party, as opposed to fee simple determinable and fee simple subject to an executory interest. Their future interests go go to the grantor. I was going to say automatic, which is not correct. Only fee simple determinable go the possibility of reverter go automatically, and the possibility the right of reentry does not go automatically. The grantor must go to court to vindicate his right of reentry. Okay, so we are dealing with the fourth wording here, the fourth union, that a life estate use language for the life of A, or for the or to A for the life of C, for the life of a third party. That's what we call life per autre vie. So with that union, then the interest, when you see a life estate, and I've seen those questions on the MBEs, when you see a life estate, right, the future interest is going to be either vested or contingent, right? Either vested or contingent remainder, right? Vested if there's no conditions and it is unascertainable people. Contingent because there is a language of condition and it is unascertainable taker. So that's make it contingent. Okay. So this is it for present estate and future interest. Very easy to remember if you follow this story, and this will give you a lot of points on the MBE. They test those issues a lot on the MBE. You may not see this on the essay. You might. And when it comes on the essay, they will ask you to basically characterize the interest. Is it a present interest or a future interest? A present possessory interest or a future interest? So with that story will help you very easily on the essay to characterize or classify those interests where they belong. And on the MBE, you will get a lot of points right. And those issues also, if you understand them, and I know you will help you also dispose of RAP, rules against perpetuators, as well, very well. RAP, again, only apply to 3 things, right? Anything else you see RAP, it doesn't apply. You can dispose of it very quickly. It only applies to executory interest, vested and contingent remainder. Only those three things, which we just did. We did executory interest, and we did life estate that necessarily follow by a vested remainder or contingent remainder. And we say rules against perpetuities only apply to those three future interests, right? It couldn't apply to the other two. It makes sense that it doesn't apply to a possibility of reverter because it goes automatically to the grantor. We will know within the life of the grantor what happened with that future interest. We will know within the life and being what happened with the future interest of right of reentry. But there's a possibility we may not know what happened with the future interest in the executory interest and on a vested remainder or contingent remainder, which is followed by life estate. Yeah. So this is a tip for RAP, rules against perpetuity, which give a lot of gray hair, a lot of headache in for the bar takers. So hope that helps. So I don't want to be too long. I'm just going to go quickly to the others. I'm not going to um, um, be as detailed as I was on life estate. I'm sorry, on the present uh, estate and the future interest. So this second tree is land use pre-closing, right? Land use pre-closing and land sell, not land use. Land sell before closing and land sell um, post closing. Land sales before closing is really your contract crossover with property. Contract crossover with property. Because in the land sales post closing, the issue is most E, MOST dash E, right? That would be those issues that you would need to be dealing with in contracts. So what are those? What does most E stand for? This is our mnemonic to remember those issues in property dealing with the crossover subject in contracts. And those issues are most E, MOSTE. M stand for marketable title. O stand for offer and acceptance. S stand for statute of frauds. T stand for time is of the essence. And E stands for equitable conversions. Equitable conversion. Those are the five issues that you'll be dealing with in a land sales pre-closing. Land sales pre-closing, the issues will be: is title marketable? Right? Is title marketable? And in every land sale contract is a guarantee that the grantor will pass marketable title. Yeah. And the second issue is whether there is proper offer and acceptance to form a contract. Entire contract crossover. Those are all of those issues are contract issues, but those are also property concepts, and very easy. The bar examiners can give us a crossover with property and contracts dealing with most E, MOSTE, marketable title, offer and acceptance. O for offer and acceptance, M for marketable title, S is for statute of frauds. We know that land contract must be in writing and signed by the party to be charged in order to avoid a statute of frauds defense. So S is for statute of frauds, and T is for time is of the essence, which is strictly construed. If time is of the essence in a contract, it is interpreted as such. No leniency in time of the essence. If the contract doesn't say it, it's silent, then time is not of the essence. Time will be of the essence only if the fact pattern told you so. If it doesn't say it, then time is not of the essence. Even the deadline for the contract is passed, the court will allow reasonable time for performance. But if time is of the essence, the contract is expired on the dot, right? Because time is of the essence. And E is equitable conversion, dealing with property issues where a seller enter into a contract with a buyer, and so the contract is signed, and before closing the property is destroyed by fire. An equitable conversion asks you who has the risk of loss. The risk of loss under the equitable conversion doctrine lies with the buyer. It was the buyer's responsibility. The seller can obtain specific performance against the buyer, even though closing is not happening yet. Okay. And for our next main issues on the land sales contract, dealing with land sales contract now post closing, where the contract now merged with the deed. So we're dealing really with the deed issues when we're talking about land sales contract post closing. We are really talking about the validity of the deed. Okay, the validity of the deed. We know a deed must also follow the formality of a contract. There must be a writing, statute of frauds. It must be in writing, and signed by the grantor. It's also must be validly delivered, and acceptance is presumed. So this is the kind of issues we are dealing with when we're talking about land sale contracts post-closing, after closing. We have to also be mindful of issues of BFP, bona fide purchases, for value without notice, which lead us, logically into the issue of notice, right? So notice, what kind of notice? There are three types of notice under certain statutes, right? And common law was first in time, first in right, but most jurisdictions now establish the statutes to determine when a bona fide purchaser has right when you have multiple buyers, right? We have the seller who sell Blackacre to A and sell it to B. So who is in right? B, A or B? Well, we follow those statutes created by those jurisdictions that abolish the common law first in right, first in time, and we have three statutes. And those also very testable issues, both on the essays and on the MBEs. There's a very easy way to remember those issues. They could be very confusing, but if you follow with me here, you will always get those right on the MBE, and the essays will be a breeze for you. So first, we're dealing with notice. So we start with notice first, right? And then the second statute, we're going to add one more word to notice. So what's word we're going to add? Race. Race notice. So we start first with notice, and then that would be our first statute. Then the second statute, we would add the word race before notice, give us race notice. And the third one, we are going to remove one word. We are going to remove the word notice. and then we will be left with race. That would be race statutes. So we have three statutes that are commonly applied by most jurisdictions. Those jurisdictions are abolished the common law first and right first in time, and then those statutes, the statute acts would be notice, race, and race. Okay, that's how I remember them, by starting with the word notice, and then I add the word race, and then I remove the word notice to give me the first statute being notice, the second statute being race notice, and the second statute being race. Understanding that way make it easy for you to get the points right on the MBE, because often is to determine when is a race notice or a notice is at issue, right? And that's how they, by examiners, try to confuse you. But if you keep it simple the way I just explained it, you will always know when is a race notice is at issue versus a notice is at issue, right? Because the way I organize them, again, principle of recall, using principle of recall, also will help you understand their meaning. Notice simply means just that. If you are in a notice jurisdiction, race is irrelevant, right? Race is totally irrelevant. The only relevant thing on a notice jurisdiction is notice. Does the BFB has notice? Right? On a notice jurisdiction, if a BFB has notice, he loses. Right? It doesn't matter who record first. Race is not important. Right? Notice is important. On a race notice, both race and notice is important. Right? Both race and notice are relevant. Race is relevant, notice is relevant. Race notice, that's why it's called race notice. Right? You have to race to the courthouse first, and you must be without notice as a BFP to win. You will lose even if you didn't have notice, if you didn't record first on a race notice jurisdiction. That makes sense, right? It's logical the way I set them up. And the last one is race notice. Again, notice is irrelevant. It's a race. Whoever get there first win. So you race to the courthouse, you recorded as a BFP, you win. Right? So that's it for those issues that sometimes give us problem, especially on the MBE, to get those answers right. If you follow that model, you'll always get them right. So we did the first tree, we did the second tree, and so the third tree would be land use issues, land use. So land ownership, meaning you own the land. Oh, before I move to land use issue, there was one very important issue that I almost forgot. It's AP, adverse possessions. It's part of the tree of land ownership, because you can own a property by adversely possess the property. So adverse possessions is on the land ownership issue trees. So let's dispose of that very quick. That may be the last thing I do, and I'm gonna give you a break. So adverse possession, the story I create around adverse possession is again very easy to remember using our principle of recall. We create a story around the water, the ocean. Okay, our mnemonic is ocean -H, ocean H. So you have to imagine that there's a big wave in the oceans that coming down to wipe out, taking your property adversely, right, without your permission. and exclusively taking over your property in a notorious manner, and it does that for the statutory period and exclusively. So Ocean Age actually has all the elements you need for adverse possession. Okay, so you start with oceans, OCEAN, and H for hostile, the last word in adverse possession in our format. So O is for open and notorious, open and notorious use of the property, apparent use of the property. You use the property in an apparent way. You're not hiding. That's open and notorious in oceans. O in oceans, O for open and notorious. C in oceans, C for continuous use. Continuously use the property for the statutory period. E in ocean is for exclusive use. You cannot share with the true owner. Exclusivity. Okay. And A in oceans is for actual use. You make actual use of the property. If the property was used for residential purposes, you use it for residential purposes. If it's used for farming, you use it for farming. Whatever the use the true owner could have made of the property, that's the use you make on the property. That's actual use. And N is for completion purposes, is for notorious, which we already use in open and notorious. So we have N to make the word ocean complete at the end. But remember, we already use N in open and notorious. And last is H, that's hostile. H for water, H2O, hostile use. So you are using the property without the true owner permission. That's adverse possession in a nutshell. You know Ocean H, you can do your analysis on the adverse possessions, and also this will help you with a lot with the MBE by knowing sometimes the MBE is one of the elements they tested, right? By knowing all those elements, using your mnemonic Ocean H will help you with that. Before I leave adverse possession, limitation is important. There are 4 limitations on adverse possession, because you're not going to have an essay on adverse possession without those 1 or 2 or maybe all 4. I don't know. Maybe not all 4, but at least 1 or 2 of those limitations will be in play. So you need to know those limitations that goes with adverse possession. What are those limitations? Tacking. To tack, TACK, you have to have some sort of relationship with the next possessor, right? Maybe landlord tenant. You adversely possess a property for 4 years. The statute is 10 years. I'm giving an example. And you rent the property to someone else for the next 6 years. That would qualify as a landlord-tenant relationship, and that would count toward your continuous use of the property, even though you live there for 4 years. There must be a relationship. If there is no relationship, tacking is not allowed. And tacking also, you have to remember, is not allowed on the house there. Okay, so this is your first limitation. Second limitation is disability. For our purpose here, disability means of age. 2 things. Disability means 2 things. Of age. Are you of age? Are you 18 years or older? Right? You cannot adverse possess against an owner who is not 18 years old or older. The statute of limitation is said to be told. It's not running until that person reaches of age. And the second disability is insanity. You cannot adverse possess at the time the adverse possession began against someone who was insane he was sick mentally, you cannot adverse possess. Again, the statute of limitation will be told. You will not run until that disability is no more, until that person become 18 or that person is no longer declared insane. That's when the statute of limitation will start running. So this is your second limitations. First limitation is tacking. Second limitations is disability. Disability means two things. You cannot adverse possess against somebody who's not 18 or older, and you cannot adverse possess against someone who's mentally ill. The other two limitations is that you cannot adverse possess against government property. And the last one you will appreciate, because we just talked about it, you cannot adverse possess against future interest, right? That makes sense. If the person does not own the property yet, has a future interest, he's not the true owner yet. So he's not, the law is not going to obligate that person to know that somebody else is taking over his or her future interest that he is not yet have. So you cannot adverse possess against government property, and you cannot adverse possess against future interests. All right, my friend. This would be your land ownership issues. We did adverse possessions. We did land sale contract, pre-closing land sale contract, post-closing, and the third three would be your land use issues. Land use, not ownership, use. And by word use, what comes to mind? Right? Easement. That's correct. Easement. Easement would be our first main issue on the land use. Our second main issue on the land use after easement would be a profit, Profit, profit. And the third main issue would be license. And the fourth main issue would be covenant at law, running with the land. And the fifth main issue would be equitable servitude. Okay, I'm just giving you those main issues. I'm not going in details with them again. This was designed to be a very short video, and I believe I give you quite a bit so far. So easement, profit, easement, profit, license, covenant running with the land, equitable servitude. This would be the issue on the land use contract. Okay. Landlord tenant issues, very testable. This is the fourth series. Landlord tenant issues. There are 4 tenancies. You need to know. There are 4 tenancies. We have periodic tenancies, tenancy for years, tenancy at suffering, and tenancy at will. You need to know those 4 tenancies very well. Very testable subject, very testable issues. They test them all the time when they test property. What else? What else going on the landlord tenant? So you need to know the rights and responsibility. The rights and responsibility of tenants, rights and responsibility of landlord, and issues such as constructive evictions will come in play. Warranty of habitability will come in play on the landlord and tenant. Issues of transfers will come in play. Transfers, assignment, sublease, delegations, and so on and so forth. Again, possible contract crossover. Other issues on the landlord tenant would be doctrine of waste, VPA, Vice President Al Gore, VPA, Vice President Al Gore, VPA, That's your waste. Voluntary waste, permissive waste, ameliorative waste. VPA, Vice President Al Gore was a waste in the 2002 elections, I believe. Okay, whatever. I mean, no disrespect, but that's a way to remember what you need to remember for the bar exam. Vice President Al Gore was a waste in the 2002 election. So, um, that's it for today. Co-ownership issues, that would be the fifth trees. Again, I'm not going on in details with them. I'm giving you the sub trees, but I have other stories that I could tell you. If you need more information, if you like those videos, just give me a like and then stay tuned for more video. I can do this for all 16 subjects. For all 16 subjects. This is probably the fourth one I did so far, and I will continue to do those as time progress. But I need to see you guys like those videos. If I see a like, I'll know it's helpful. It's I'm helping someone out there. Okay. If I'm not helping anybody, there's no need to do those videos. All right. So if you like those videos, leave me a comment, share the video with other students who are either in law school. This is very good for law students as well, and people who are preparing for the bar exam. Share it with them, like the video, leave me a good comment, so that I can continue to do those videos. If nobody likes them, then there's no point, right? So I'll leave you here and wish you good luck in the future. Although I don't believe in that, but go ahead, do what you gotta do.